Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining. I'm privileged to lead off this discussion, a very timely one on Zohran Mamdani and how to fight back. This is a webinar on countering the extremist influence in our schools, government, and public discourse, with an emphasis, of course, on New York City, which is where we are all focused because of the significant change that's going to happen on the 1st of January as Zohran Mamdani becomes the mayor of New York City. I am joined this evening by Jacqueline Toboroff, a political commentator and the author of Supermoms Activated. So I'm very passionate about fighting for our community, for New York, and for sanity in an otherwise crazy place. We have with us Ben Ryberg. He is the Chief Operating Officer and the Director of Research, an amazing lawyer at the Lawfare Project. We also have Adar Rubin, the Director of Mobilization for the End Jew Hatred Movement, who we all need to get grassroots activism going because we need to address Mamdani and all of these problems on a comprehensive scale. My name is Gerard Filitti. I'm an attorney and senior counsel at the Lawfare Project, and it's a privilege to look at real-world consequences of what happens when people vote for someone who does not like Jews. Zohran Mamdani is not just a progressive politician. He is the public-facing tip of a broader ecosystem that merges anti-police agitation, youth radicalization, and anti-Israeli and anti-Jewish extremism. The danger is not just academic, and it's not his rhetoric. It's the way that his rhetoric legitimizes Jew hatred and anti-democratic principles in New York City. It destabilizes public institutions, our trust in government, our ability to have the police protect us, our ability to have our kids not be indoctrinated in schools, and our ability to walk on the streets in safety without fearing agitation that takes place. This election was also monumental because the policies that Mamdani wants when it comes to the economy can also be a destabilizing factor in New York City. And a lot of people are concerned not just with the political rhetoric, but with the economic damage that may be done to our city. We're already seeing real estate spiking in Miami as people are fleeing the city. And for those of us born and raised here or who've made this our adoptive town, this is not something we want to see. We want to see New York City thrive. Mamdani is part of an ecosystem. It's not just him. It's a larger problem that reinforces messaging to youth, and these are the young people who turned out like never before to vote for him. This is why he won. It's not that he mobilized the older voters in New York, it's that he got this whole new group of first-time voters who don't really understand necessarily the principles of capitalism. They believe that socialism is a good thing, and unfortunately, they've been brainwashed in our schools to believe that hating Jews and hating Israel is something to be commended rather than to be condemned as a violation of civil rights and basic principles of American democracy. How did we get here? Social media influencers, campus groups, whether it's Students for Justice for Palestine, the Young Democratic Socialists of America, anti-police collectives. This has been going on for a long time. We have teacher networks and activist educators who are indoctrinating our youth, unions that are not protecting the few teachers who are standing up against all of this, community programming and community messaging that is very divisive and issue oriented. And all of this came into being with an ideology that is hostile to law enforcement, that looks to defund and deprotect Jewish institutions, that does not want to impose consequences on harassment or intimidation and threats, especially against Jewish New Yorkers, and that has normalized anti-Israeli and anti-Jewish propaganda in schools. This is baked into the cake. Students learn to hate in school. I know that this is perhaps a controversial thing to say, but they learn that some people have more value than others. And the others that have less value are Jews. They're other minorities. They're conservatives. They're people who don't believe or don't live in the ecosystem, in the echo chamber that is socialism of the type Mamdani preaches. And we all anticipate that there will be major policy changes. Let's leave aside for a moment the idea of free food in city-run grocery stores, or free busing, or free education, or free childcare. A lot of these cannot be implemented simply because Mamdani does not have the power to do so. He needs city council. He needs the state legislature. He cannot unilaterally come in and impose taxes. For that, he needs broader support. So it's not that that's not a concern, but that's not something that we can more directly address through litigation. That's activism with our elected officials to make sure that they understand this is not what we want in New York City and that they should not be assisting Mamdani in these policies. But what we are more worried about are the more practical effects, because there are regulations that can be imposed, that he can impose, whether it is discriminatory boycott, divestment, and sanctions activation. He wants, for example, one of his policy agendas is to cancel contracts with Israeli companies or companies that do business with Israel. He wants to take pension funds out of companies that have business in Israel. This is BDS in a nutshell. We're worried that if he implements that, that creates actual discrimination in New York City. We also are concerned about his appointment in other government agencies that can bring in regulation that's hostile to economic growth and ingrains hatred within these departments. We have real concerns about K to 12 and the type of education our kids are getting with an appointment of a school's chancellor and school's policy. People that he can put on the CEC and PEPs in New York City that have essentially Board of Education powers that can bring about policies that are very detrimental. And we are concerned more generally about what will happen to crime and to safety. All the more so after what we saw at Park East Synagogue the previous week. We have concerns that if our safety is not being addressed now, what will it be like in a few months when Mamdani is essentially in charge of the police and police practices? He has already said, for example, that he wants to arrest Benjamin Netanyahu if he travels to New York. Now, that's great political rhetoric. It's not something he can legally do, but it gives you an idea that we should be concerned that even when the law is on our side, it may not be enforced or followed. So, from a general 80,000-foot perspective, we need people to be willing to come forward to identify what they're experiencing under Mamdani. We'll discuss, everyone will discuss a few more specific things during the course of this webinar. But the most important thing from my perspective, apart from activism, is the power of the legal system. There's a lot that can be done to challenge whatever it is that Mamdani does. But in order to do so, we need people to come forward and be willing to be plaintiffs, to be complainants, to file petitions, to file complaints, to be represented, and put themselves out there when they're negatively impacted. Because if all we do is complain and no one is willing to come forward and say, hey, look, I am being harmed by this, I want the law to come and help me, I want the legal system to step in, unless we have people who are brave enough to do that, policies will be implemented, changes will happen, and there's nothing that we can do afterwards other than complain that how did we let it get to this point? So the most important thing from my perspective is people need to be aware of what's happening and how it impacts them. And if they are impacted in concrete ways, in schools, and Jacqueline can speak about this, and in businesses, and Ben will speak about BDS and boycotts and what we can do to fight back. But when people are actually impacted by this, they need to come forward. They need to be willing to stand up and be heard and to file those legal challenges, because there's a lot that can be done. Look, it doesn't matter what political party you're in, but for the last more than 8 years, we see that whenever someone's in the White House, the other group files lawsuits to challenge pretty much everything that's done. And these lawsuits take time and they prevent the implementation of some policies and they slow others until there's a new administration. Same principle works at the city level as well. So we need people to be willing to come forward when Mamdani does things that we believe to be illegal or harmful, to file those challenges, to be able to be in a position where we are ready to go into court, seek an injunction, file a lawsuit, and say this needs to stop because you're violating legal rights of New Yorkers. And here's someone who is willing to stand up and say my rights are being hurt. So from the big picture overview, there's a lot that can be done. For example, with boycotts. Boycotts are illegal under New York City law, New York state law. We have federal laws as well, anti-discrimination laws. We need people, if they're affected, if they're a business that's being targeted, we need them to come forward so that we can file a lawsuit on their behalf. If you're looking at schools and you're impacted by discrimination as by racism, we need people to be able to actually come forward and file these complaints, whether it's a Title VI complaint or an actual lawsuit. even the mere fact of filing an incident report is significant because that alerts the public that there are problems and that these problems need to be addressed. This last week, we've seen reports that a New York City school and a middle school in Brooklyn refused to allow a Holocaust survivor to come in and speak about anti Semitism because of his views on Israel, which is absolutely absurd. And here we're kind of off the record, we're making progress in having that changed right now and having the city do more with Sammy and talk about anti Semitism and recognize that what this principal did was inappropriate. But we can't make that change unless people are alerting us that this is happening. Unless people are actually going into a school and saying, hey, we want to bring someone in to talk about anti Semitism. Here's who we'd like you to bring. And then they get denied. Best case scenario, they have a speaker to talk about anti Semitism, to talk about the Holocaust. Worst case scenario, we have a problem that we've identified and we can go through the legal system to fight it and bring about change. So, from my perspective, the most important thing is to be alert to what these problems are and to have people who are willing to come forward and take action against them. Not everything is actionable. We unfortunately can't do much about some of the rhetoric that's out there. There are some indignities that we have to accept in life, and especially in a city like New York, nothing's always perfect. But when it comes to discriminatory practices and policies, we can take action. There are things that can be done to bring about meaningful change. And at the risk of repeating myself way too much, it's really important because in all the years that I've been practicing with the Lawfare Project fighting for Jewish civil rights, the most challenging thing is for someone to actually come forward and be that person that says, I will be an upstander, I will be a plaintiff, I will fight for change. Because you know what? When those people do come forward, there's a good chance that there's something that we can do about it. But when people just want to hide and make it someone else's problem, nothing ever gets done. So, what kinds of things should be on the lookout for? Well, now that we've had a 40,000 foot view or an 80,000 foot overview, let's look at where Mamdani's impact is felt more acutely and where the danger exists more profound in our school system and in the broader cultural direction of New York City. With that in mind, I'd like to turn it over to Jacqueline, who has been one of the most outspoken parent advocates in the city, and she's worried about exactly what we're experiencing right now. The school system is being reshaped by ideological forces that do not hide their hostility towards Jews. At the same time, we're watching Islamization taking place in New York City and in public spaces, especially, culminating in Mayor Adams' own proclamation just today, trying to establish that BDS is wrong in New York City, that we can't have these actions. Why are these necessary? Because we have given a permissive atmosphere towards radicalization in the city, and Mayor Adams is trying to do something to at least alert attention to that. So will New York City be safe for Jews or for anyone under Mamdani? We already saw what happened at Park East when Jewish institutions are targeted and the city's leadership is silent on it, or they use platitudes but don't actually implement changes. So Jacqueline, I'd love to hear your thoughts on all this, the state of the school system, the cultural trajectory of New York, what Mayor Adams' proclamation signals, the implication for safety, and finally your strategic advice for parents and students and what they can do, what they need to be alerted to.
Okay, so cut me off whenever. I just want to give an overview as to the landscape of New York City before I answer those questions. And that is, New York City is currently, per Moya, the mayor's Organization of Immigrant Affairs. It is currently 40%, 40% immigrant. Many people say that is low, and it's over 50% immigrant. Foreigners in America, foreigners in New York City elected Zohran Mamdani, not people who are born in America voting for Zohran Mamdani. We have a tremendous problem here. The elephant in the room is that foreigners are installing red, green candidates. Now, the other thing here is that Zohran Mamdani cleaned up with the Muslim bloc. He carried it by 92%. I'll get into that in a second, as well as people under 40. Now, the Muslim bloc is something to really consider because it votes along ideological lines, 92%. went for Zohran Mamdani. And the Muslim population in the past 20 years in New York City has gone up 900%. It was 75,000 in approximately 2000, and it has grown to nearly 800,000 present day. Okay. Every other group has declined in birth rates. Muslim Americans and Muslims now outnumber Italian Americans in New York City. This is something to keep in the back of your mind. Now, Zohran Mamdani won with approximately 460,000 votes for the primary. Hamas was basically headquartered at CUNY, NYU, and Columbia. Combined, those campuses have approximately 400,000 students, faculty, and staff. Okay, so these universities, these American institutions have been turned into Hamas or pro-Palestinian headquarters. Many of these universities, I've broken reports on this, like Columbia University is majority foreign students and whatever they call scholars. Not sure what the litmus test for the scholar program is in Afghanistan or Iraq, but nonetheless, these are the people that we are importing. American education is owned by Qatar and the CCP. And what they do is they buy influence, they silence critics. We now have teachers that are akin to terrorists. And what is being pumped out are terrorists. They're people who are ideologically anti-American. And whether it's the women who are coming out of these schools, these white women who are now cheerleading this Islamist rape machine, they have made Hamas, they have made Palestine aspirational. Palestinians, Gazans elected Hamas. This is not a normal group of people. And that is what we are dealing with. There is no way to discuss Zohran without directly discussing schools, education. And again, this has now been completely taken over by Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Arab oil nations, and the CCP. Now, Zohran Mamdani is using as a shield the Democratic Socialist of America title. He's an Islamist. And this is when two completely disparate groups like this transgender and Islamists meld together. This is the Red Green Alliance, right? You have the red is communists, globalists, socialists, and that is still more palatable to Americans than Islamist, which is the green, which is what he is. He only glommed onto this affordability in recent months. Prior to that, whether he was getting tutelage from Linda Sarsour at Empower Change, he was all about pro-Palestine, which we know what pro-Palestine is. It's pro-Hamas. Regarding Mayor Adams, EO, look, he's out of here in what, 3 weeks? I'm not quite sure what this symbolic gesture is. Zohran Mamdani has already come on record that he's going to reverse it, as is his right. So unless there are real regulations that come out of what Adams has done in the past, within the next 3 weeks, it's going to be extremely easy to overturn. Something else for people to keep in mind, Muslims in New York City government are all Democrats. They are all on the left. Many of them are DSA. The city council is going to have, if it doesn't already, a supermajority of DSA, the Democratic Socialists of America. Zohran Mamdani ran on the WFP line, the Working Families Party line. Both the DSA and the WFP are extremely anti-American. They really champion cultural Marxism, economic Marxism, as well as, of course, pro-Palestine, which is the linchpin. And there are parts of Queens that Zohran Mamdani won, which are over 65% immigrant. Tom Homan, you should go with ICE to Queens. We have someone, Adar who Zohran has endorsed. She will likely win. She is just as deranged as he is. So this is what's going on. And I will say regarding the lawsuits, Zohran Mamdani received foreign illegal cash, including from his wife's mother in Dubai. It's unclear to me why this administration's DOJ has not investigated the CFB, the Campaign Finance Board. Zohran received over 170 foreign contributions. Again, this is illegal. There have been many things we could have done to stop him from becoming mayor legally, whether it was that he lied on his citizenship application and he's a communist or whatever he wants to call himself, or even again, looked into the CFB, the matching funds that he received. Now, I will say this, there is another way to get him, as well as some of these other radicals, whether it's Brad Lander or Tish James or another Islamist, Shahana Hanif on New York City Council, or Chris Marte, or Jamani Williams. And that is, there are three federal statutes that have to do with obstructing, harboring illegals, obstructing ICE. These seditious six from New York City, and I write about it in my latest Substack article, they have broken the law. They have obstructed immigration. I mean, they have gotten in ICE's face. They have told podiums, people who are listening to them, to obstruct ICE. And it's unclear to me why, after this memo that came out from Emile Bove saying that prosecutions should ensue on a state and local level for people that obstruct ICE, why nothing again has been done legally to ensnare Zohran Mamdani. So I think people are going to get very frustrated coming forward when they see that really nothing is happening, and there is ample stuff that we could have gone after Zohran Mamdani for.
I think you're absolutely right. And to piggyback on that, I think that's one of the problems or the weaknesses in waiting for federal authorities to do something is because we often don't see the political will or their other priorities, which is, I think, one of the things that we always push for, especially when we're asking for a new legislation, is that there should be a private cause of action, a private right of action, so that private individuals can sue to compel that government action, which otherwise we cannot do. That's one of the biggest challenges because we cannot, unfortunately, compel people in government to do their jobs. We can vote them in and out, but we can't force them to uphold the laws. That's the election process. But that's a big frustration that a lot of us have, is quite simply that there is clarity as to what the law is, but it's not enforced. We see this even with hate crimes in New York City. Alvin Bragg has been a disaster. He does not prosecute hate crimes, especially targeting Jews. He prosecutes everything except things like that. And that's a problem. That is something that we have to rely on the election system for. And I think a lot of New Yorkers completely even forgot that there was an election for a district attorney in Manhattan. It's just not something that gets attention. So part of that is also we need to keep doing as you're doing, highlighting these problems on media and making sure that New Yorkers understand that they do have a role to play, that this is something very important.
Yeah. Again, as a mother with two kids in the belly of the system, I will say that every single bad idea starts in a New York City school and then fans out to the rest of the nation. Every single one. And really, the lines right now are extremely blurry. Qatar has pumped in so much money into nursery schools in New York City, as has the CCP, into grade schools. Grade schools they all work together, right? You go from nursery school and you have to be primed to accept the woke language of what is going to be coming your way, both as a parent and a student in grade school. Grade school, it ramps up to another level. I mean, you have things like SEL, CRT, all these things that everyone is well aware of. And then you move on to college. College, you are only getting into if they understand. Look, every single application has to do with some sort of woke prompt. Every single one. If you go on to any mission for any school, public or private, it's the same thing. And in New York City, there is something called substantial equivalency. So you are paying the privilege of going to a private school, but it has to dumb down to the public school. So whether it is equitable grading, or whether it is not counting attendances, getting rid of honors, accelerated classes. These are little things. They're actually huge things, but they're one peg at a time, one peg at a time. We see that BLM was a means to mainstream Hamas. These are very similar riots. They are daily. There is a pro-Palestinian incident in New York City daily, whether it is occupying sidewalks, federal buildings, schools, subways. This is daily life. It has been mainstreamed in New York City. New York City has become very inhospitable to Jews. And it's not just because they're Jews, it's because it's an attack on the Judeo Christian West. These people are coming here, they're refusing to assimilate. And I will say, I think the biggest misconception is when people actually assume that Zohran has been installed by foreigners to balance a budget and fix, the affordability crisis. Zohran Mamdani is here to bring the revolution. He's already won, as has DSA, as has WFP. He does not have to do one thing. In fact, it would be better for him if he could tank the economy. The people that voted for him, it was always funny to me watching these ads attacking him for not liking police. That's why they voted for him. They are revolutionaries. Colombia is ground zero for the revolution. So he doesn't have to fix anything. He has to actually destroy it. This is the Islamist march through the institutions. It's going to be a very long one.
And it's really sad that that's where we've gotten to in New York City. Unfortunately, not surprising. I will leave with a little bit of optimism in transition, saying that although I don't remember it being this bad, we did go through bad things in New York. We've had mayors like David Dinkins who turned New York City into a cesspool. And for every David Dinkins, there's a Rudy Giuliani. So I think there is long-term hope that after Mamdani, people will wake up. But it's the people on this Zoom, it's people like Jacqueline, like Ben, like Adar, who need to lead the way, because otherwise, if we don't wake up to this danger, it's just going to continue going down that direction. And Jacqueline, I want to come back to you in a little bit after Adar speaks a little bit about the End Hate in Education initiative. I think I'd love to get your views on that. But first, I want to turn it over to Ben, because one of the clearest things that Mamdani has said he will do is engage in BDS. And one thing before turning it over is, one mistake that we constantly make is referring to BDS as a boycott of Israel or a boycott of Israeli businesses. We need to remember what BDS actually is. It's discrimination, pure and simple. And what you're discriminating is not this abstract business, it's people. You're targeting Jews and Israelis, national origin discrimination, religious discrimination, with discrimination because you don't agree with something. But it doesn't matter what you don't agree with. Ultimately, you are targeting something that is owned or operated by a Jew or an Israeli, and that in itself is discriminatory. So we have to take this out of the realm of, we need to respond to BDS by defending Israel and saying what great good they do for the Israeli economy or for Arabs or for the world. It doesn't matter that they make or don't make iPhone components or invent things. We have to bring it back to the language of civil rights, because that's what is protected in America, not ingenuity that some other people develop. That's patents, that's copyrights. But if we want to talk about discrimination, which is what BDS is, we have to frame it in the language of civil rights. And Ben did that extremely well in an amazing case against the National Lawyers Guild, which is one of the worst hotspots of anti-Semitism. And these are lawyers who do nothing but spread anti-Semitism, it seems. Ben, can you tell us more about that case and what we can do to fight BDS when and if Mamdani decides to adopt it?
Absolutely. Thanks, Gerard. And to everybody who joined, thank you for being with us tonight. The irony of that case is that the National Lawyers Guild has for years referred to itself as the progressive alternative to the American Bar Association and the oldest and largest progressive bar association in the country. It is made up of a network of thousands, I believe, public interest and human rights lawyers, activists, etc. And they purport to exist to stand up for people whose civil rights are violated. When in fact, when it comes to Israelis, Jews, they do the exact opposite. They were and continue to be to some extent, but less so following our lawsuit. They had been one of the leading proponents of BDS, including attempting left, right, and center to argue that laws like New York State's executive law, Section 296.13, I don't expect you to remember that, and I will come back to that law shortly, that laws that prohibit BDS conduct, that's not advocacy of BDS, but it is actually implementing what BDS calls for. It is implementing boycotts, refusals to do business with Israelis, with Jews. The Guild spent a lot of time trying to argue that that law didn't apply to BDS conduct. So, jump forward, and the Guild had issued numerous statements supporting BDS, saying they implement BDS, et cetera. And they were having in, I believe, 2015 or 2016, it's been a bit now, an annual gala. And they were selling ad space in their big glossy book for that gala. And an Israeli organization that was authorized to do business in New York attempted to buy ad space. The simple ad, nothing political or controversial, unless merely being Israeli is controversial, which for some it unfortunately is. And it just said, "Congratulations to the honorees from organization name Israel." And the organization paid the $250 or so for the ad, and shortly thereafter received an email from the Guild's national office that said, "We're very sorry, but we have a policy that prohibits us from accepting money from Israeli organizations. Therefore, we're going to refund the money, and we're not posting your ad. We're not dealing with you. Goodbye." Our lawsuit was filed almost immediately thereafter. And I mentioned New York's executive law, Section 296.13. It's a very unique law. California has a very similar law, but a lot of states don't, unfortunately, and they certainly should. This law makes it crystal clear that it is unlawful in this state to boycott, to blacklist, to refuse to buy from, sell to, engage in trade with basically any commercial activity another party because of their race, their color, their ethnicity, their citizenship, their national origin, and so on and so forth. It is a broad law, but it was actually enacted to confront the boycotts of Jewish businesses when the Arab League boycott of Israel really took off. So this law, and we'd argued this, we at the Law Firm Project had argued this beforehand, which the Guild had tried to present counter-analysis and didn't work very well. We said this law clearly stands for, as Gerard said, that what the BDS campaign is calling for is ultimately unlawful commercial discrimination. People can try to cast it as freedom fighting, as whatever else. It's not. It is unlawful commercial discrimination. It is calling for refusals to deal commercially with people, with companies, because of who they are. So we filed the suit in New York Supreme Court, and it went on for quite some time. The Guild tried to argue many times that this was their First Amendment right to boycott. The court repeatedly rejected that in their motions to dismiss. And this is an argument we see a lot. And again, yes, it may be lawful to advocate for BDS, but if you are implementing it, that is not lawful. That is not First Amendment protected speech, no matter how many times the Center for Constitutional Rights and the National Lawyers Guild and the rest of that ilk try to claim that it is. Ultimately, after 4 years of lengthy litigation, we entered into a settlement agreement, which is what we'd hoped for, because ultimately this case was not about getting some money. It was about effecting systemic change and sending a very clear message, the message I just said about what BDS is, unlawful commercial discrimination. And in that settlement agreement, the Guild had to take a number of steps, including disseminating to its hundreds, thousands of members, its chapters, its staff, its professionals, that this settlement had happened, that none of the organization's policies were actually to be interpreted in a way that required any form of unlawful discrimination against someone based on, again, their race, their national origin, et cetera, et cetera. So basically the message was, yeah, we have all these existing pro-BDS policies, and that's what we're calling for. But at the same time, we're telling all of you that you can't actually do anything about it because you'll find yourself at the receiving end of a lawsuit, which you will lose, which the guild lost. The guild still, I actually checked this earlier, they have a permanent message on every page of their website that reiterates the non-discrimination policy that we created for them. And with this also, we part of this was just breaking their actual boycott. At the end of the day, they agreed for very little money to sell ad space to the plaintiff, to our client, the Israeli company, to show that no, again, they may be supportive of BDS publicly, they may be telling other people to engage in BDS, but they're not even actually doing it and they're doing the opposite. They are engaged in commerce with Israelis because that's what the law says you have to do. So this was a major event. I don't think there were any other cases that used that used the New York executive law in this manner, particularly after such a previously outspoken proponent of BDS. Again, what is so important and what Gerard has said, but I really want to underscore, is that this is precisely if you have a company, if you know somebody who has a company, or you're a sole proprietor, and you are subject to a boycott based on being Israeli, based on being Jewish, based on your connections with Israel or Israelis. The law does extend that far. If that happens, you are in a unique position to stand up and do something about this. Because, again, there's a lot of BDS rhetoric. There's frankly not thus far, which is a good thing. There's not a lot of commercial activity that actually implicates the law that furthers BDS. Companies have been good about it for whatever reason, whether they're scared of lawsuits, whether they are just simply anti-BDS. I can't tell you. Either way, it's a good thing. But if this does happen, particularly if Mamdani pushes this kind of behavior or adopts policies that require it, come forward and we will help you. And I'll also just say, I'll echo what Gerard mentioned about one of perhaps the biggest difficulties that we face, even though we file many lawsuits. We have 20 something going on right now. The biggest issue we face is again and again that people who are in situations where they have been the victims of civil rights violations like this, where they therefore have standing to be a plaintiff, to file a lawsuit and vindicate not only their rights, but the rights of the Jewish community more broadly, that a lot of people are afraid to take on that role. And I will say that of the many lawsuits, the 160, I think, plus lawsuits that the Lawfare Project has pursued over the years, we've never had a situation where a client at the end of the lawsuit has said, I wish I didn't do that. So just keep this in mind, and please share this information with anybody you think it might be relevant to. Feel free to put anybody in touch with us if they're experiencing issues with BDS. Again, we all have an ability, if we are victimized in this way, to stand up for ourselves, and that's precisely what we should do.
And building on that, it's especially important if you have a business, if you are involved in business, if you have a company and you do business with Israel, or you're Jewish and you are affected by policies, this is where it's important to know that it's actionable, that there's something that can be done. Going back to what Jacqueline said, she's very right. What we see from Eric Adams' executive order, it might as well have been, written by Joe Biden and signed with an auto pen. That's as valid as it's going to become January 1st. But it does point to a difference between targeting pension funds, for example, and targeting individual companies. When you are looking to pull New York City pension funds from companies that have in their funds Israeli companies or Jewish-owned companies, it's more difficult to have that plaintiff withstanding to bring a lawsuit, which is why it's more important to have these laws, which is why anti-BDS laws in so many states specifically address pension funds and this type of finance. But when you have private individuals, and Mamdani has actually said that he is going to look at ways to cut city funding, city grants, city loans from going to Israel-oriented businesses. That is the essence of implementing BDS, when you're cutting government contracts with someone, with a company, because it's Israeli or works in Israel or does business with Israel or does business with Israeli companies. That's the essence of a private plaintiff who can very likely take this to court. And that's not something we need to go lobby Albany for. This is something that you file right in New York City. You walk into court and you file that because it's a violation of executive law. It's a violation of New York City human rights law. It's potentially a violation of many laws that come into play when you're discriminating. So to that end, Ben, the question that I have for you, I think that is prescient for purposes of this is when we're looking at companies that themselves are considering discriminating, not because Mamdani or anyone else passes an executive order or issues a directive, but because they have employees or they have pressure coming from the outside. Hey, you guys should engage in BDS. Is there anything different that people can do or should do if they're working for a company where someone is pressuring them to engage in BDS?
Absolutely. I mean, particularly in New York, we're happy to help with this, but you can go to the decision makers at the company and educate them on the existence of this law and other related laws, some of which Gerard mentioned. And you can educate them on the fact that this lawsuit happened and that these are the consequences of engaging in BDS conduct. I mean, one could also attempt to explain the whole situation. There's much more to it about how BDS, there's plenty of literature, I'm sure most people on this call are aware, about how BDS has not proven to be helpful to the Palestinian people in any demonstrable way, how increased BDS activity on campuses is associated with increased incidents of anti-Semitism and violence. There's a whole lot that could be said, but at the end of the day, I tend to think that's sort of spinning wheels with most parties that you'd be talking to. And at the end of the day, I find that companies in particular, I mean, they're out to protect their own interests, including their legal and financial interests. So I would say it's a very easy way to shut this down. And we've seen this over the years when we have counseled a number of large companies that were approached and pushed to engage in BDS. We've just explained to them, like I said, here's how the law works. Here's what can happen to you. Do you want to take that risk? And overwhelmingly, the answer has been no.
And that's the same pressure that we can bring to bear on the city of New York under Mayor Mamdani or anyone else for that matter. So the law gives us powerful tools, but these tools only matter if communities know how to use them. And that brings us to Adar Rubin, whose work focuses on giving communities the structure, the language, and the strategy to respond to these rising threats, from school boards to public hearings to mobilizing to show that we are not silent and that our voices matter. And this is particularly important these days because I hate to say it, but I think we all see it. It's the loudest voices that get the most attention. The power of the anti-Jewish protests that we see, whether at Columbia or anyone else, is that they're what gets media coverage. That's the message that people see. And if you're an elected official, if you're a police captain, if you're a business owner, and all you see are voices, or all you hear are voices that say, pardon the language, fuck the Jews, or fuck New Yorkers, then you're less inclined to stand up against it and you're more likely to go along with it. So we need activism. We need that pressure on elected officials, on law enforcement, on communities to understand that we are here and we have rights and we're not afraid to enforce them. So Adar, what can parents do? What can citizens do in education to address this and more generally to mobilize?
Thank you, Gerard, and good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you all for tuning in. So there's a lot that we can do to meet this moment, and that's what it's all about. It's about meeting the moment, even in the post-10/7 world. With the Mamdani effect, we are nowhere near done with our mission. So school board advocacy and parent teachers association advocacy, general K-12 advocacy are at the forefront of what it means to make meaningful change. Radicalization happens in the classroom. We saw this happen on the collegiate front, but there's not enough emphasis on K-12. This is our youth we're talking about. There's numerous incidents that have been going on, around the country as a matter of fact. My own girlfriend told me about students of hers that were waving this, that were doing the Sig Heil salute in the classroom. Emphasizing the degree and depth of how bad things are getting. These are 13-year-old kids she was talking about. But there's a lot that we can do, and there's a lot that we should do, and mobilization matters, activation matters. So there's first and foremost, many of you are essential when it comes to mobilizing people. Many of the people here on this call have been active with the End Jew Hatred movement. There's a lot of brand new faces, which we love to see. But, it's important that you learn these skills. So when it comes to advocacy for the K-12 front, school board, PTA, highest priority. Now, as a parent, you have a legal right to obtain curricula and to know what your child is learning in the classroom. You can submit lots of different formal requests, but to be more clear, we have a formal K-12 initiative that we recently launched called End Hate in Education. So all of you can go on Google, type in End Hate in Education and Jew Hatred, click on the link. You will see a very, very, very interesting glossary that showcases the guidebook for both the United States and Canada. It gives you a great resource library on certain laws that you can use for reference in various states. And, the emphasis on this is to bring transparency to the community. Now, what do I mean by transparency? You want to know everything about your child's education. Even in the political world, both Republican and Democratic staffers engage in oppo research against elected officials on the campaign trail. Now, when they're looking at oppo research, they're looking at expenditures, they're looking to see how the candidate functions, who they're associated with. It's the same kind of element to an extent. So when it comes to that, I mentioned that curriculum, your syllabus and everything, you have a legal right to obtain. Most specifically under the, the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act, also known as FERPA, which is used to inspect and review your child's educational records maintained by the school, which could include lesson-related materials if they are part of the record, which means assignments, assessments, notes on progress, etc. So you don't need to provide a reason why you want to see your child's records, and the school, by law, is required to comply with the requests within a 45-day window. Now, I want to talk about the most important aspect, which is going to those parent-teachers association and school board meetings. You want to engage similarly to the opposition research front. You want to scope the scene. You want to look and understand what is going on. You want to look at agenda items. You can even submit agenda items days in advance. It's required that you do it days in advance. In our guidebook that's featured on the End Hate in Education campaign website, you will have easy access. You will have the tools necessary to instruct you on how to properly make those requests within your respective school district. Now, you basically want to focus on the classroom and outwards. So when it comes to building coalitions and engaging those school boards, it's important that you have support. As Gerard perfectly mentioned, all the noise that we're seeing in New York City and around the country, a lot of these politicians were swayed by the noise, even though they had no moral justification to their arguments. It was just noise. But in our sense, we have a moral reasoning. I mean, we're fighting for Jewish civil rights. And not even just that, but the civil rights of everybody impacted by radicalization. So when it comes to engaging parents or engaging parent-teachers associations and school boards, you want to scope the scene. You want to build alliances with teachers, principals. When you go to those school board meetings, you want to see the environment, see if there's any regular people that are regularly showing up, see what they're saying. You're allowed to give public commentary as well. But everything that you do when it comes to engaging your school district, and this is the most important thing, has to be in writing, because it could take one lack of enforcement from a school district on a new policy centered on protecting your Jewish students that could result in serious litigation or serious oversight from the Department of Justice, as a matter of fact, where school districts can lose federal funding over these things. It's the same thing as the college side. We saw what happened to Columbia. We saw what happened to Harvard. We saw a lot of these things take place. So when it comes to when it comes to any engagement with anyone from your school board, it's important you have every single bit of communication in writing, especially when they refuse to comply with their own rules, because that will merit a lot of backlash, to say the least. And we can convey the backlash. We are a vessel that we will utilize to help carry your activism. When you want to build these coalitions, you want to build and engage your community as much as you can. It is so important that you use your voice for your students, and not even just your voice. Invite your students to speak out. As we said earlier, right now, as Mamdani enters his first term as mayor of New York City, we want to see people become plaintiffs. We want to see people, sign up for lawsuits because they are impacted by his policies, so to speak. Now, you can submit proposals and formal agenda items. It varies by state. Certain states have different regulations on them, but at the same time, you have the ability to present it during public commentary, which I already noted. One of the most important things that you do when you engage your school district is referencing the parental rights statutes and open meeting laws to reinforce your standing or demand change for your student, for all students. When it comes to this, you never want to stop fighting. This is something that is of the highest priority right now. The End Hate in Education initiative is your ultimate guidebook. This is a combination of so many brilliant minds, panned out into this. And we have so many amazing partner organizations that we've been working alongside, to help support this effort. It is a unified front. It is a meaningful front. You have the ability to make policies. And most importantly, you have the ability to even run for school board. It is vital that you use your voice. As a parent, you have to step out of your comfort zones. We are the movement that will give you the guidance and instructions as to how to engage in meaningful conduct and show, I know I mentioned noise, but we don't want to apply the same tactics as the opposition. We want to show that we're the moral messengers conveying a simple message of, hey, support Jewish civil rights for everybody, or for every Jewish student in this public or private school. It is so essential. I cannot begin to emphasize it enough. You need to become meeting regulars. You can easily look at agenda items online, and you have the potential to really make a difference in your classroom. So, with that being said, I encourage you all to Google the End Hate in Education initiative. I'm happy to even share the link in the Zoom chat. Reach out to me as well. I am going to provide my email. If you have a coalition of parents, right now we've been doing a series of mobilization workshops instructing parents and activists how to become meaningful leaders, healthy activists, the right messengers to make meaningful change. I will be your guide, and I will provide you every resource that I can to help you fight. It is so important that we take this on as Mamdani assumes office. I cannot emphasize enough how key it is that you can make a difference, and you are not alone. And we will make sure that you have the tools necessary to bring about the meaningful change that is necessary for your community.
Well, thank you, Adar. Three quick thoughts before transitioning. One is, it really is crucial for people to show up at their local CEC meetings. They need to be involved and know what's actually going on within their district, within their school board. They need to participate. They need to put items on the agenda. They need to put proposals in there, whether it's proposals for policies on Jew hatred, or, as we've seen in this last week, one of the biggest things that we're seeing, and this is the second thing, is problems with process. One of the strongest cases to be made for consequences or for change or for bringing about a positive outcome is when process is not followed. For example, if there is a rule about outside speakers and the school doesn't follow it, that is a problem. That is a problem that exposes the New York City public school system to liability, but that's a pressure point on the school. We want to hold them accountable whenever a decision is made to exclude or include someone. We want to know, how is that justified? What policy played in? What are your points that you made the decision that you did? And we want them to commit to this, because we see oftentimes we can make some change or get some leverage if process is not followed. And the bigger one, and this goes back to something Jacqueline mentioned before, we do have to be mindful of what's being taught in the classes. We say Qatar, but what that really means is Qatari government pays for essentially teacher training programs that prepare materials for teachers who either don't know about a subject or know and don't care that they're helping indoctrinate and spread the message. But this is the material that is anti-democratic, the type of material when you see that Israel was not included on a map of the Middle East, that's the type of thing that comes through Qatari teacher training programs. When you see history lessons that include every minority group except for Jews, that comes from lesson plans that were developed by someone. So one of the things, and this is what I want to ask you, Jacqueline, because I think this is where we need to focus. How do we find out what's actually being taught in the classroom? What is the best way that we can put pressure on teachers to actually be both transparent and to use the right kind of materials?
So I just want to be real. I mean, I'm listening to what everyone's saying, and I'm telling you, as a parent in New York City, this just is not how it works. Um, I've been to these school board meetings. They are absolute mayhem. You have trans kafiyas that take over the duration of the meeting. Nothing remotely academic is even discussed. If you want to go after the process, that's fine. But I'm just saying, I've been to these meetings. You're not getting anywhere other than recording, which I do, and then I post it and it goes viral. The reality is, we are in an environment that is, and I think maybe some of the emphasis should be taken off Jews. I think it should be placed more on Judeo-Christians and Americans born in America, because this really is Americans versus foreigners. And just to say, nothing that is on the agenda is ever discussed at the public school board meetings because they are taken over by trans kafiyas who protest, who scream, who bring instruments, music, who do dance moves. I was attacked by one of them. It went viral. They are insane. You have DEI police officers or security guards that pretty much do nothing. So just understand the reality of this situation, no matter what is put on that docket. And I have whistleblowers that will tell me or that will send it to me. It is not discussed. The New York City education is a clusterfuck. It is the most expensive education in the world. Zohran Mamdani, who has 0 kids, that is one of the things that he will be in charge of, along with the NYPD. It's quite ironic. As mayor, he's in charge of the NYPD and Department of Education. He has 0 kids, and he's from Uganda. He really knows nothing about American education except when he was sucking the tit off of the specialized high school that he went to, which now he wants to destroy. The teachers' unions, what is his name? Jermaine Williams, I
Jamal
forgot.
Bowman.
Thank you. Who's a thug, in addition to being an anti-Semite. These people are integral to being the human wrecking balls to education in New York City. It went up from, in 1 year, $26,000 despite record outmigration to $39,000 before any other costs are factored in per public school student annually, only because of the amount of illegal aliens that we have been saddled with. So the education is completely destroyed. There is no saving it. There is documenting what you see. Again, Private schools have something called substantial equivalency. The only thing you really get from a private school is a smaller class size and less violence. And those right now are two premiums that parents in New York City are struggling to pay for because they realize they don't want their kids going to a school like Hillcrest where they hunted down Jewish teacher. She had to hide in the bathroom. Okay. And then you had at the time, what was his name? New York City School Chancellor Banks, installed by Adams, who called the two Muslims wonderful people who naturally agreed with the hunting down of the Jews. For me, look, I'm a bad Jew. My whole thing has been Judeo-Christian America. That is what I look to preserve. I think the Jewish angle, while important just because it's Judeo-Christian America. The real issue here is, again, it's Americans have been completely replaced. I will say this, I am not a lawyer, but I am an expert researcher, and we now have part of Zohran Mamdani's transition team, two Islamist lawyers that represented Mahmoud Khalil that, by the way, we still cannot get rid of. We still, I hate to send people off the cliff here who are counting on lawfare. We still cannot deport Mahmoud Khalil. Now, his two lawyers are part of Zohran Mamdani's 400 Islamist strong transition team. These two lawyers will be crafting legal policy in New York City. I repeat, they will be crafting legal policy in New York City. So good luck again to anyone that wants to come forward. You will be dealing automatically with obstructionist judges, and now this new legal apparatus, which you can bet is tied to care. They keep their nose down, and the lawsuits coming, the pressure on. This is legitimately the reality. And I don't think we should sugarcoat it or get complacent. I think it's important to fight it. I think it's important to message how we fight it. And the losing message is to only focus on the Jews. No one likes Jews. There are too few Jews. 30% of New York City Jews voted for Zohran. That is not necessarily an attack on Jews. That is because they were also, by the way, under the age of 40. Okay. And everyone under the age of 40 went for Zohran, Jews or not. The only reason why we focus on the 30% of the Jews is because it is shocking. But not really. Jews, Reform Jews are problematic. They skew Democrat. In America, Jews skew Democrat. What is it? 60%. So, this is the reality of the situation, and we cannot ignore it. I would say again, there are many things to ensnare Zohran legally. We've seen them. They have been ignored. Nothing has happened. I think if these things are ignored, you are going to be very hard pressed to find a mother to come forward and put her neck on the line. And I will say one other thing, in all honesty. Parental rights is bullshit. We had no parental rights during lockdown. We had no parental rights during BLM. You guys can bang on about that. The reality of the situation is you can get kicked out of private school because they don't like how you smell. If you go to a public school, I don't know what your rights are. Your rights are to get hunted down like that teacher or to get a crappy curriculum. So I would say the most important thing is messaging. And I think the messaging has been terrible from the conservatives, terrible from the Jews, terrible. And I think I would work on messaging, and I would not throw around nonchalantly lawsuits unless they are actually going to happen. And again, we have many things now, whether it is Zohran being arrested 3 times for blocking ICE. He has just gone on record to say that he will not be cooperating with ICE. Does that mean that New York City has seceded from the state and the union? That sounds like it could be a lawsuit if he as mayor blocks ICE. But again, it doesn't seem like we're that serious about doing anything. I'll leave it there.
And that's the issue with waiting for the federal government to step in, because you're absolutely right. When it comes to sanctuary cities and sanctuary policies, these are illegal. These are things that could have been actionable. You can go after the individuals, the mayors, the governors, the people who are involved in blocking access, and who have put forth these policies of non-cooperation, because that's obstruction. So this is something that I am genuinely surprised not to have seen more of this. But again, we don't know what the next 3 years will bring at the federal level. At the city level, no, it's not easy. And with schools especially, it's depressing because it seems that there's no break. But I do think there's something to be said for, we can't give up the fight. And you are right about making this is a broader societal issue. This is, to use the language that has been so weaponized, this is about our democracy. It's about democratic values. We're fighting for our principles. And those are Judeo-Christian values. Those are American democratic values. It's not just the Jewish issue. It's a whole of society issue. I think Adar can also mention some of the groups that he has outreached and worked with, other minorities as well. But this is why we also need to get your average New Yorker involved in this, because they need to realize that they have skin in the game and that it's causing pain for them, and it's only getting worse, both with what their children may be going through, or if they don't have children, what they will be experiencing, because this is the way society is shifting. But at the end of the day, this is a whole of a society issue. I think what makes this an I'm trying to use a word here that's non-confrontational, but what makes the Jewish community especially suited for this battle? Not only is it feeling it so badly in New York City, it's a minority community, and unfortunately, as we've seen for many, many years now, you don't really have the same legal protections if you are white, middle class, Catholic American. The rules apply to you more than they apply to anyone else. You're looking at protected minorities. They're the ones that are pushing the system in any direction. So I'm not saying that this is a moral obligation on the part of the Jewish community, but as a minority community, the Jewish community does have that ability to bring the civil rights issues as civil rights violations that other groups cannot. So I think this is where the power is. It's having allyships to make in the activism realm especially, but also knowing that the civil rights protections are something that the Jewish community can avail itself more readily than other communities. So when you combine the messaging, which is very important to have a whole of democracy approach to this, we're all in it together and we need to fight back against this with legal action. I think that's where there's a chance. And unfortunately, New York City is far behind the game. There's been too many years of bad developments, of indoctrination, of radicalization to make that change overnight. And it's only now are people starting to wake up a little to it, because, oh my God, Mamdani won, and how is this possible? How did we allow this to happen? That's a reflection of where we are in New York as a result of many, many years of decades of social shift that people just have not been privy to. But I think that when we do have this activation and bring other allies into the fold, that's the best chance of waking up people for the future. And it's not something that's going to be remedied overnight. But I do think that there is a lot of value to be said in fighting for our legal rights when we can. And to your point, Jacqueline, yeah, we absolutely should not bring, and I'll call them what they are, bullshit cases. You cannot file a lawsuit because someone is wearing a keffiyeh and you don't like that they're having a Palestinian flag. You file a lawsuit when your rights are impacted, when you are prevented from going into a building, when you are treated differently at work or at school, when you can't go into your place of worship, be it a synagogue, a church, or even a mosque, because there are protesters outside who are calling for your death. These are the cases that we want to file, because these are the ones where the law is more ready to make change than for someone who is merely offended by something that they don't like. So we have to bring meaningful legal challenges. And that's why I love Ben's approach, because when you look at anti-discrimination laws and boycotts, the law actually is strong and on our side. So this is why it's useful to see the different perspectives here, is that there are some things which I will say myself, sometimes it feels hopeless, especially when you look at education. There are tools we can use, but that's long-term change. Some things are things that we can do. And when you have actual discrimination that's implemented, not just talked about, not we want to boycott Israel or we want to fire Jews, but when that actually happens, then you do have strong legal recourse. So we want people coming out of this to realize that you need to be aware of what's going on, and you need to see where the real battles are. And when you actually are experiencing discrimination, that's the strongest legal action. For the rest, it is mobilization. It is bringing in other communities and taking the long approach that we need to make change, just like we've had change used against us.
Yes, I agree with that. I think the most important thing, again, not to beat a dead horse, I think the messaging has been terrible. I think the schools is the number one issue that people want to gloss over and go to everything else. It's this red-green alliance. There was something else that you had mentioned, and I just want to touch upon it. The obvious ways that the schools prompt, groom kids are what you mentioned. It's going after Jews. It's excluding them. The much more pernicious ways are the ones that you should be looking out for. These are the ones, again, that laid way to where we are. They are the ones that break down people's moral compass. They are the ones that break down people's competitive nature. They are the ones that break down the so-called white constraints. The whole goal of this, again, always remember, it is the revolution. It is the destruction of the Judeo-Christian American ethos, and that is because it's considered white, the white construct, showing up on time. This is something schools no longer care about, attendance. That might seem like it's not anti-Semitic, but again, all of these things are building blocks to where we are. When you call it equitable grading, that's a problem, whether you're Jewish, Black, Christian. But again, these things tend to hurt certain groups more, right? Jews are now feeling it. They're on the back end. But it's the very subtle ways. For example, when Claudine Gay was supposedly fired, which she was not, she was moved to a different position and got a pay raise. These are false flags, and Jews have to stop falling for it. When we get rid of someone who's terrible, they always put in someone worse, someone much smarter, craftier, that's working behind the scenes. CARE is extremely smart. They are navigating things and everyone's playing catch up. So, looking at schools, I think the worst thing to do is to only look for the things that, quote, impact Jews. It's all the other stuff. BLM, CRT was the worst thing, yeah, for Jews, but I wouldn't message it like that. It was the worst thing for, again, Judeo-Christian America. It was the destruction of capitalism. How is that bad? Multiple ways. Jews don't do well under communism. We've seen that story before. So again, I would focus on messaging. I would focus on schools. I would focus on moms. I would focus on people that actually have kids in New York City, which is the belly of the beast, because just saying things that sound like slogans, it's not working. It's just not working. And people like me, we see it, like I'm living it. It's not real.
That's a very, very true and very powerful statement of why we need that change. Ben, I wanted to pick your brain for a second. You've been involved in litigation against some of these colleges, including CUNY, Columbia, or some of these places where we've seen New York society at its worst, and that have been the incubators of this hate. Jacqueline mentioned the lawyers that are working with Mamdani. It should come as a surprise to no one that they're on faculty at CUNY. This is the hate that we're exposed to. What have you found to be effective, Ben, in terms of lawsuits? Have they been effective at the college level?
They've been incredibly effective. That is, well, the cases that we have decided to pursue because we pick cases that we identify to be effective. We have picked cases where there is clear, demonstrable discriminatory treatment, exclusion of Jews from campuses, exclusion of Israelis, instances where students complained through the appropriate channels, Jewish students complained about incidents involving anti-Semitism, about anti-Semitic treatment directed towards them, or even more broadly that they experienced. And instead of doing anything about it, which in some instances the schools may not have been obligated to do what the student wanted, but instead of doing anything, the schools took very aggressive, very serious retaliatory steps against the students. So this is precisely the type of case we take on because there's too much to do. We're a small organization. It's not worth it for us to take on cases that we don't think have a damn good chance of winning. And those are the cases that are going to move the needle. With those cases, this is generally not about money. We're not here if we can get our clients something, some compensation for what they've suffered. That's terrific. But really, this is about affecting systemic change. And because we have chosen these or to pursue these extremely strong cases, that has put us consistently in a very, very strong position when we're getting into settlement negotiations. And through settlements, much as it may not sound as dramatic or exciting as a court decision, but through settlements, that's how we can get schools to implement these specific and systemic changes that we identify that would better protect Jewish students and Jewish faculty, Jewish anybody on campus now and into the future. It's about looking at, okay, what are the holes right now? How is it that the Jewish students are being treated the way they are that has led to these types of lawsuits? And what can we do to plug those holes going forward? Is it a matter of there needs to be a new office or a new position created that specifically addresses Jewish students' concerns, issues relating to anti-Semitic discrimination? Is the issue that the school has, whether for faculty, administration, or whoever else, that the school has plenty of diversity training, but none of that is about anti-Semitism? Or if there is some about anti-Semitism, that it's only about what everybody already knows is anti-Semitism, drawing a swastika somewhere. Not that I'm not diminishing that. That would be absolutely terrible, and we have seen that. We're talking about the more modern form of anti-Semitism. Efforts to exclude so-called Zionists, which we all know means Jews, and applies to the majority, of Jews on most campuses. And administrators, the people who actually handle the complaints of discrimination and harassment that students submit, they need to be educated on those things. This is precisely what we look at accomplishing with settlement agreements. Are there rules that don't exist? Do the policies not go far enough to protect Jewish students? Whatever it may be, this is exactly what we're looking at. This is why we pursue these cases. And again, this is why we look for cases, and we don't take on every case that comes to us, much as we do think that everybody who's been wronged deserves to be helped. But again, focusing our resources on where they're most impactful, we take on the strongest cases at universities that have significant issues so that we can affect that kind of change. Again, this is change that is not just geared towards this year or helping this individual student who is our client. This is enduring change. And through these agreements, we obligate the schools to set these new policies that continue forward into the future. And if the schools fall short of their obligations under these settlement agreements and are not enforcing policies that we have gotten them to agree to or whatever it may be, then we can haul them back into court. We don't have to relitigate the whole situation, or the new situation, rather, what's happening at the school. We can simply pull them back in and say, this is a breach of contract. You agreed in the settlement to XYZ. You're not doing XYZ. We've never actually had to do that because once we enter into these binding contracts, the schools understand that this is what they have to do, like it or not.
Excellent point. Jacqueline, I am mindful of your time and very thankful that you've been with us here this evening, and you've certainly opened a lot of eyes to what's going on in New York City. I do want, before you go, I want to ask you a broad question based on a lot of the questions that we have gotten. NYPD, There are people who are afraid that it's going to get worse. I am one of the people who thinks the NYPD is already doing jack shit to help New Yorkers, and that it's already kind of a, I don't want to say a lost cause, but they're not our friends. So I see what happened at Park East and anywhere else with all these protests as par for the course. What do you think?
Yeah, so this is again like the bench is so low. D De Blasio wrecked the NYPD. Mayor Eric Adams wrecked the NYPD. Cuomo wrecked everything he's ever touched. We are living under the jackboot of one party Democrat rule. And what they have successfully done is they've broken people like me who have only voted conservative, except I did vote for Cuomo. I was left with no choice. But they've broken people like me. I now have zero trust for the law enforcement. There are many reasons why. I've seen videos of them just standing there doing bugger all nothing. I've seen it with my own eyes. I've seen them ticket like the soccer mom using her son's Metro card, but not the three homeless kafia people that just jumped over. So the left has been amazing, like they are at a lot of things, at destroying the public's morale of the NYPD. They pretended like the Black community during George Floyd and BLM was afraid of the NYPD. And we all saw that that was bullshit. Just like we see Islamophobe is bullshit. The only people that are doing any of the marauding, the occupying, the conquering are the Islamists that take over again. Federal buildings, school buildings, bridges, tunnels, subways, streets, Times Square. They're the only people, the only group. They are a threat to everyone, these Islamists, everyone, including other Muslims, including young kids, including girls and boys. The situation with the NYPD is dire because Zohran Mamdani, again, is anti NYPD just because he claims it is racist, despite the fact that it is majority minority. I believe you can put this on paper. The goal is to get rid of the current DEI NYPD and replace it with Sharias. We've already seen ample videos of these Sharia women wearing hijabs. How is this going to impact women? Uh, Islamists have much different views about women. We've seen Zohran with domestic violence. Hate crimes. He wants to expand the hate crime division. That's only going to work one way. Everything is going to be Islamophobic. You know, just just talking about what they do is, Islamophobic. So that I have zero faith in the NYPD. It can only get worse. They want to shut down jails. They want to spring violent criminals. They want to allow sex workers. This is all of it, if you connect the dots, to align with this new group that has come to New York City, the Islamists, who have, again, no regard for women, no regard for young children, no regard for American laws. And so everything here, again, is the revolution. And you're going to see a shift in schools. It's already happened where they now call it young love. You are going to see a lot of discouragement of nuclear families. That's a white construct of marriage. They would never pull this shit in a majority Muslim country. This is only going to be for America and for the West. And the NYPD, good luck. Good luck. I think, again, messaging, schools, and Jews really need to start to think about an alternate economy. I would push back against one thing, and it is this new position or discussion of a new position of some DEI version for Jews. It has not worked out well for Black people. There's Black fatigue, there is Jew fatigue. I don't think Jews should get on the bandwagon of now expecting handouts, a separate office, a separate monitor. We have been at the top tier of overperformers for a reason. We are critical thinkers. we can fucking adjust, and we can get shit done. And I don't think we should allow them to gaslight us into thinking that we are needing special help and, like a little ball of clay to make it through. That's not how I'm raising my kids. I'm not on board with that at all. I rather them have to figure out how to adjust, burn the system down from the inside and play the game from the outside. Handouts and all of this stuff, that's communism and socialism, which I'm not on board with. So I would push back against pushing a separate group, which again is only going to raise tuition, raise tax dollars for this new group of people now looking out and monitoring Jews. I would say the best point is to video everything. You don't have to be confrontational. You don't have to get in someone's face. I have my phone in my hand the second I leave my apartment. I video everything. I don't even get involved, even when these kafias attack me, and I'm attacked all the time. I live in New York City. I take the subway 6 times a day. I would video everything. You can go to these school board meetings. You're not going to hear about education at all, but you can film it. You can see what goes on there. I think that's how you fight back. I think you fight back by doing what the mainstream media refuses to do, and that is actually reporting what is really happening. Because anytime you do that and it goes viral and people see it, they are disgusted. I have something I put up on my Instagram 2 days ago. It already has 3 million views. It's of Muslims occupying a public street, blocking traffic, and just praying at 5 a.m. People are disgusted by this, not Jews, Christians, Americans, people in Kentucky, people in, all over America and Delaware are seeing these videos of the Islamist takeover, and it is happening everywhere. New York City is just the first to fall, and it is happening everywhere. So I would, of course, speak up, sue when you can, but whatever lawsuit, I would make sure it's as big as possible. Like, I would just shine the spotlight on the dysfunction that Islamists and communists have when they combine. They're the 2 most deadly ideologies, and that's what we're dealing with.
I think I also love your activist mentality, because we shouldn't be on the defense all the time. We should take the fight to them. I mean, that's the only way that we actually get change, is to highlight that we shouldn't think defensively justifying our existence. We have to put the pressure on them, to put the pressure on the highlights on what the other people are doing to destroy our culture. So I think that is the right activist mindset. We shouldn't be wrapped around with defending our existence, but we should be proud in who we are and take the fight to the other side.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. Document everything, record everything. My favorite line that Elon Musk has ever said, we are the media. Record, document. Yes, show up to the school board meetings if you have time, if you want to do it. It's an education. It is an education in seeing how they are wasting, shitting away your money, shitting away your kids' education. And I would also say to any normal parent who is watching this, you better be quarterbacking what your kids do. My kids have a whole other assignment when they get home, irrespective of what they do at school. And again, I'm a shitty Jew. I grew up, as reform as it gets. To me, this is not a Jewish thing. Again, it's Judeo-Christian. I don't ever want to wear a burqa. I don't ever want to wear a keffiyeh. I don't want to hear, by the way, Mayor Eric Adams violated separation of church and state by allowing Muslims to broadcast their call to prayer. That's another thing that we could have, I don't know, launched a lawsuit against him. We didn't. So now that has been mainstreamed. So, parents who are watching this, let me tell you something. You can't even imagine what your kids are picking up at school, hiding from you, or suppressing. You cannot even imagine, because I do this all day long, and what I know, and then I hear from other kids or this, it's mind-blowing. So you can get all the information, the syllabus, the reading, I get it all. You cannot farm out, if COVID taught you anything, you cannot farm out your children's education. You got to monitor what's going on. And you also have to teach them not to be pussies. I mean, you don't want to, and I hate to use this stereotype, raise a whiny Jew. You want to have kids that have friends across the board. I curate my friends, my kids' friends. I curate this. And you can call me whatever you want, a helicopter parent. I don't give a shit. Like I've got two kids that are street fighters in New York City, who understand the difference between right and wrong. And again, we're not religious. This isn't that. This is just, I like freedom. I want my kids to have families and be able to afford families and be able to wear a Jewish star or a cross or whatever it is, and, not pay for their own demise. So I would just say to parents, quarterback your kids' education. Do not farm it out. Do not trust these schools. We have now seen they are deadly dangerous, and we're forced to send our kids to them.
Well, thank you, Jacqueline, for the wake-up call. We really appreciate you being here tonight. I think before we transition into questions, as unfortunately I think you're pressed for time, I will kind of end the formal portion on a positive note in answering the first question. No, Mamdani cannot be president of the United States. Thankfully, he was not born here, and the Constitution does not allow that. So unless you change the Constitution, which is not going to happen anytime soon, you cannot have Mamdani as president. So that's one good thing that we can kind of end on.
Thank you so much. If anyone has any questions for me, I am extremely active on social media. You can find me on my Instagram, which is Jacqueline for NYC. That's JACQUELINEFORNYC. I engage with pretty much anyone who doesn't insult my looks or call me a Nazi. If you have any questions, New York City, I like to connect the dots. You cannot look at this with tunnel vision. This has to be a holistic approach to Mamdani. And I think, look, I think one of the worst things we can do, normal people, is to just get up and leave. There has never been a war won where a general just surrenders. And part of my frustration was listening leading up to the primary and then after the primary. Give them New York City. Well, you know what? Let's give them Nashville. Let's give them Georgia. Let's give them Epic. Let's give them Minnesota. Let's give them Dearborn. Let's give them fucking America, if that's your attitude. Everything starts in New York City. It's the center of gravity, and then it spreads out. So we should have fought this much sooner. And you should still fight it now by, again, coming up with financial ways to screw the coffers of New York City and New York State, as well as fighting back by exposing what is happening, videographing it, writing about it, telling your friends. Be an agent of change. Take control of your own life. Be accountable for what you do. If you see something in school, you can tell a mom, you can tell there are things you can do. Again, I'd be very cautious with school. If you're in a private school, they can kick you out for anything. And if you're in a public school, I don't know where you're going, because this is a systemic issue that we have now. Contrary to what people think, every single school has doubled down on DEI, present day double down. So I don't see it getting better. I see the new voting blocks, but there are things that we should do to stave it off and to fight back. We shouldn't just lay down.
Well, thank you, Jacqueline. Shows that there are so many different approaches we can use, and working together, we can all make a difference. Thank you.
Thank you.
Adar, I wanted to ask you something, and going into the questions, I know someone mentioned Mossab Hassan Youssef, and he must be allowed to speak freely on college campuses. What have you found effective, because you're working with our campus fellows, the End You Hated campus fellows, what have you found effective on college campuses in terms of mobilizing and changing the rhetoric?
Yeah, absolutely. So, obviously he's entitled to speak on campus. Our modus operandi tends to be more on the Jewish civil rights aspect of speakers. So pretty much bringing in non-Jewish allies, Jewish victims of hate crimes, non-Jewish victims of hate crimes even, to talk about their shared experiences, ways we can work together and be effective leaders on the campus front. That tends to be helpful. Me personally, I don't really like to do the debate format. For me, it's more like a town hall style. I encourage people to bring in elected officials from both sides of the aisle, make it bipartisan, have them communicate amongst each other. We've done this at Arizona, or not Arizona State, the University of Arizona, as a matter of fact. We brought in the Hernandez siblings. 2 out of the 3 are sitting elected officials. The third was actually a former elected official. They're Latina Jews, as a matter of fact. And we also had a non-Jewish ally, who was a Republican, and he was fantastic, Justin Wilmeth. And they came together, talked about ways that they could work together to enforce meaningful change. And it's not even just the campus space. Like, bring it to your synagogues, bring it to your communities. Ira passed in the state of Georgia over a year ago because we worked with Hadassah and AJC and state representatives Esther Panich and John Carson, to sit down and talk about the importance of why IRA is a tool used to help validate our civil rights and help identify basic anti-Semitism, how it can be used as a mechanism for good. So there's a lot of opportunities to go about it. Mossad, definitely yes, but I always like to separate the Israel stuff, a little bit. I mean, we're obviously all pro-Israel here, but I'd rather focus on telling the stories of Jewish civil rights leaders and general civil rights leaders, victims of genocide, people who've come from persecuted communities, or Jews that have been persecuted from other countries even. There's a lot of opportunity. There is a big market for it. I noticed it tends to draw interest for students when non-Jews speak, who technically shouldn't have skin in the game, but they do because they care, and they see that after you go for, or they come for the Saturday people, then they come for the Sunday people. I know it's a cliched term, but it's true. We see it invoked we see Jew hatred and rhetoric invoked towards other communities. So yeah, definitely focus on non-Jewish civil rights speakers, non-Jewish civil rights speakers, to be more specific. There's a lot of people. I'm happy to offer suggestions. My email is in the communications chat in Zoom.
Thank you, Adar. And that also brings to mind that, for all the potential pessimism that we sometimes feel, there's never really been a Jewish civil rights movement before. I mean, we had Soviet Jewry, but there's never been a movement bringing together Jews for Jews and our allies for our cause. We've marched with every other minority group. We've marched for every other cause, but we've never really stood strong against Jew hatred. And so I think that is something unique that End Jew Hatred does, and that is part of an answer, one small part of an answer to Mamdani and the extremism we see. Because if we're not out there and representative, if we're not mobilizing, then what's the alternative to just hide away and hope for the best? We have to be active, and that's part of it. So thank you, Adar, for what you do. And the other part of it is, Ben, it's the legal. And I wanted to ask you, Ben, we've seen the emphasis in the last 2 years after October 7 on college campuses, but where do you think we should go? What would be the type of cases that you would like to bring systemic change that helps us?
That's a great question. Frankly, right now, I do think there are still campus issues, and I do, unfortunately, despite the cases that have been brought that are pending but proceeding successfully, and the cases that have already been successfully resolved, we're not seeing all the issues going away. We are seeing improvement, but I do think these cases do continue to need to be brought. Really against any school where Jew hatred is a pervasive problem on campus. Again, I think it's about looking at the totality of the circumstances. If there is one incident, not that any incident of anti-Semitism is ever acceptable, but we need to be prioritizing on where time and resources are best spent, and that is certainly on campuses where the behaviors are the most egregious and or the most widespread. Beyond that, though, unfortunately, employment in general, we're seeing a tremendous amount of anti-Semitism in the workplace. Some of it, while again totally unacceptable, is not necessarily illegal. When we have situations where other coworkers are expressing, sort of views that many on this call, or that most on this call, would view as anti-Israel or anti-Semitic, but are not, let's say, directed at a Jewish individual, where we're not having concrete instances of discriminatory treatment. That's not the type of case to bring. But there are, again, that's a few. That's one side of things. The other side is situations where Jewish individuals at work are being denied their legitimate and lawful requests, obligated requests to observe Jewish holidays. When they raise concerns about anti-Semitism in the office, they are shushed and sent away, and even worse, they are retaliated against. We've dealt with a number of cases like that. So I would say those are the priority, just because that's what we've seen most. That's what we're seeing most right now. But with the Lawfare Project, and this has always been our approach, we don't limit ourselves to any particular type of lawsuit. Wherever the issues arise and wherever the issues are severe and are significantly threatening to members of the Jewish community, and where there is good, meaningful legal action to be taken, that's where we go.
Oh, thank you, Ben. And it's also worth pointing out that just as there hasn't really been a civil rights movement for Jews in America, when you look at civil rights litigation or litigation for upholding our rights, look at history. Slavery ended 160 years ago, but it took decades after that to start having laws that protected African Americans. It took decades after that to start enforcing those laws through strategic litigation. The reality is that change takes time, and change takes legal action as well as activism. And we really need to have these lawsuits and cases and to bring about change through the legal system, because that is the most lasting change we can have. Elected officials come and go. They enforce the laws or not. They make things better or worse for a period of time, but law is more enduring. So we really need to use the legal system as much as we can. And remember that this is really, and I hate to use this phrase, but a long game. We cannot expect results overnight. Other groups have been fighting for their civil rights and for social justice for decades. We're only starting now to get caught up. So thank you, Ben, for all the amazing work you do. And thank you all for joining this webinar. I hate this part, but I have to do this anyway. We are a nonprofit. We rely on your support in order to bring these meaningful cases at no cost to people who are experiencing discrimination. And this is very significant, especially on a week of Giving Tuesday. We need your help. We're making a difference, whether it's grassroots activism or strategic litigation, whether it's in the classroom or in the halls of Albany or Washington, D.C. We need your help to make that difference, because the tide will be turning. It's already turning. And all of you are part of that change and making that difference. All of you are activists at heart, for being here, for participating, for wanting change and a betterment of our community. But we also need your support. So if you can, we strongly ask that you donate. I've placed a link for the Lawfare Project in the webinar chat. I thank all of you for being part of this experience. It certainly has been an evening, and we look forward to coming up with new briefings on how to address the problems that we're facing. And the most important thing is you need to be awake and alert to what's going on, flag the issues so we can see what we can do, whether through activism, through mobilization, or through legal pressure, or through the media, to bring about change that we all need. So thank you all for being here this evening. Thank you, Adar. Thank you, Benjamin. Thank you, Jacqueline. Thank you all, and good night.